as we celebrate the man who waited decades to be a monarch, spare a thought for his grandson, 11-year-old Prince George.
In the midst of celebrating the long-awaited reign of King Charles, attention is also shifting towards his young grandson, the 11-year-old Prince George, who has been a central figure in the royal family's future. After 9 years of dedicated care, Prince George's private nanny, Maria Teresa Tionbalo, was unexpectedly let go, leaving many to wonder what happened behind closed doors. Why did the palace make the decision to part ways with someone who had been such a pivotal part of his life for nearly a decade? However, it wasn't just her departure that shocked the public. It was what Maria did next that went viral overnight. Maria began her duties as George's nanny in 2014 when he was just 8 months old. A graduate of Norland College, renowned for training nannies for high-profile families, Maria was selected not only for her expertise, but also for her ability to maintain strict privacy. She adhered to the brown Norland uniform and kept a low profile at events, rarely drawing attention to herself. Though she was seldom noticed by the public, Maria was a constant presence in George's life, providing him with the steady care he needed. From the very beginning, George was a reserved child who preferred routines and didn't handle sudden changes well. Maria tailored her care to suit his temperament, offering him a comforting sense of stability. Though she was hired to care for a child, she was well aware that this wasn't just any child. This was the future king. The process to hire her was thorough, and both Prince William and Catherine were involved in the decision. They wanted George to have as normal an upbringing as possible, despite his royal status. Maria's days began early, often before sunrise, in George's nursery. She would softly hum as she checked his temperature, arranged his clothes, and prepared his bottles, all while ensuring she remained respectful of the invisible boundary between staff and family. She was more than just an employee. She saw herself as part of an intimate process, a quiet witness to moments that very few would ever experience. George's infectious laughter filled the halls, and Maria quickly became attuned to his moods, understanding him in ways that few others could. Though William and Catherine were always involved in George's upbringing, their royal responsibilities meant they couldn't always be home. That's where Maria stepped in, offering a comforting presence during those times. She helped George with everyday milestones, from sitting at breakfast to taking his first steps and staying up with him during nights when his teeth hurt. As George grew, Maria's bond with him deepened, and she sang Spanish lullabies, passed down from her own mother, to soothe him. Maria always remained just out of sight, holding up a soft toy or saying silly words that only Prince George understood, all to make him laugh. While the world saw a picture-perfect moment of a joyful little boy with a wide smile, the true essence of the moment was something more private. For Maria, the real significance came just before the photo was taken, when she quietly played her part in bringing him comfort. As George began attending nursery school, Maria adjusted her routine to support him during this new phase. Each morning, she would carefully pack his bag with clean clothes, snacks, and a small toy, before walking him to the car and bending down to whisper a quiet goodbye. "Be kind," she would say softly, "and listen well." As George grew, their relationship deepened. He became more observant, noticing when Maria seemed tired or wondering why she always wore the same blue coat. One day, he even mimicked her Spanish accent, not to tease, but simply to understand. Maria, always nurturing, taught him a few Spanish words, keeping them as their little secret. "Buen días, Maria," George would proudly say, a smile lighting up his face. Over time, they built a bond of trust that needed no loud commands. Just a quiet word or a look was enough to guide George. When he asked questions about the world around him, like why people waved at their car, Maria would gently explain, because they care about your family, and seeing you makes them smile. The simple truth that Maria shared with George helped him navigate the complexities of palace life. While the royal environment could sometimes feel overwhelming with its many rules and expectations, inside the nursery, Maria created a safe and familiar space for George. It was as normal as life could be for a boy whose face was already recognized across the globe. Maria marked his milestones in small but meaningful ways, like on his 5th birthday. After his big party, she surprised him in the staff area with cupcakes she had baked herself, decorating a small table just for him. When George saw the treats, his face lit up, and he asked, "Did you make these?" To which Maria replied, "Just for you, always." Not every day was easy, however. Like all children, George had his tough days. He could be stubborn or upset when things didn't go his way. But Maria knew how to handle these moments with care. She didn't dismiss his feelings, but helped him identify and express them. "Are you frustrated or just tired?" she would gently ask, allowing George to work through his emotions. By the time his younger sister Charlotte was born, Maria had already settled into her role, remaining close to George even as another nanny was brought in to assist. She still walked with him through the palace gardens, where he would collect leaves and sticks, calling them treasures. Maria was also there during family trips, like when they went to Scotland when George was about 6. She spent her days outdoors with him, skipping stones on the lake and searching for bird nests in the trees. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire in the grand library, reading stories together. George often fell asleep mid-story, his head resting on her shoulder, and his hand clutching the edge of her sweater. Maria had been there through every small hurt and every joyous moment, from scraped knees to lost teeth, from birthday candles to difficult lessons learned. Her presence was a constant comfort, a steady and loving guide throughout his childhood. Maria spent countless hours tending to Prince George's needs, staying up with him when he had a fever, wiping away his tears, and cheering him on when he scored his first football goal. She knew that her role as his nanny wouldn't last forever, as all nannies eventually step aside. Yet, she cherished the trust George placed in her and felt immense gratitude for being a quiet but pivotal part of his childhood. She understood that her influence would never be captured by cameras or written in headlines, but she had shaped the early years of a future king in ways only those close to him would ever fully appreciate. By the time George turned 7, his nursery had undergone a transformation. The once baby-filled room now held books, toy planes, and signs of a rapidly developing mind. The days when Maria fed him porridge and helped him into soft shoes had faded, replaced by mornings spent preparing his school clothes, packing his books, and helping him learn new words before his ride to Thomas's Battery School. Life inside Kensington Palace had become more structured and fast-paced, with George's school days filled with lessons, sports, piano practice, and occasional public appearances. Though Maria was still an important part of George's routine, things had changed. She no longer needed to carry him. Instead, she watched as he ran ahead, growing more independent by the day. George started packing his own school bag, and even asked to tie his tie without help. But he still turned to Maria for small tasks, like showing her what he made at school, or asking for help with his shoelaces. Maria adapted alongside him, giving him the space to grow while remaining a steady presence nearby. She spent more time helping with his daily plans, cooking his favorite meals, and listening attentively as he shared his thoughts or asked questions. As George approached his 8th birthday, his questions deepened. No longer content with simple why questions, he began to ask about more profound matters. One evening, after attending a charity event with his mother, George asked Maria, "Do all children have beds?" Maria, always kind yet honest, responded softly, "No, not every child has a bed." The silence that followed spoke volumes, revealing George's growing awareness of the world beyond his own privileged life. By this time, the royal family had expanded, with Charlotte growing into a confident young girl, and little Louis already full of energy. The Cambridge home was now a busy household, but Maria remained focused on George, even lending a hand with the younger children when needed. Though George's royal duties increasingly took him into the public eye, Maria helped him hold on to his true self. At official events, George would stand with his parents, dressed smartly and maintaining a composed demeanor. But at home, he was simply a boy, with curious questions about his title, the presence of guards, and the constant attention from the public. Maria answered these questions in a way he could understand, reminding him, "People expect a lot from you, but that doesn't mean you can't be yourself." Maria made sure George kept his love for animals, his passion for drawing, and the carefree joy he found in laughter and board games. Their special bond remained strong, and during family trips to the countryside or beach days at Anmar Hall, Maria was always there, keeping a watchful eye from a distance while allowing George to enjoy his childhood. As he grew older, so too did his role, and by the time he turned 9, the public began to see more of his royal responsibilities, from attending his first Wimbledon match to meeting more significant figures, all while maintaining the poise and clarity that marked his growth. To Maria, George was still the same boy, the one who had once stopped to help a hurt bird or left sweet notes for her at breakfast. Sometimes, the notes simply said, "Gracias," thanking her for helping with his homework. It was in these quiet moments that change happened. One autumn, during a school break, George spent most of the day in the library with his father, reading about explorers from the past. Maria had set up craft supplies for them, just as they had done over the years. But this time, George walked past the table without a second glance. Her heart sank a little, but she said nothing. She quietly packed up the supplies and made tea instead. It wasn't that he didn't care, it simply meant he was growing up, and she understood that. By the time George turned 10, he had joined several sports teams, each with set schedules. He was growing taller, and his thoughts were becoming more focused. His love for football grew stronger, and he developed an interest in history, especially the World Wars. He began asking more thoughtful questions, comparing dates, remembering facts, and even correcting his younger sister Charlotte when she got something wrong. Despite the changes, Maria continued to help with the little things, like cleaning the mud off his shoes after football, making sure he packed enough snacks for his school trips, and always checking on him later when he needed space. When George had his first school trip away from home for 3 nights, it marked a significant change. Maria helped him pack his bag with warm clothes, a flashlight, and waterproof boots. Before he left, George gave her a small nod and said, "I'll be fine." She believed him. When he returned, he seemed taller, though maybe it was just the newfound confidence he exuded. He spoke to his siblings like someone a little older, and though he didn't seek out Maria immediately, a few hours later, he found her quietly reading in the staff sitting room. "I remembered everything," he said with a smile. "I didn't lose a thing." Maria smiled back, replying, "I knew you would." As time went on, George's responsibilities grew, and his schedule was filled with more official duties. Prince William and Princess Catherine did their best to shield him from stress, but some things couldn't be avoided. His title came with its own set of responsibilities. Maria's role had slowly shifted. She no longer planned his days, but instead helped from the background, quietly supporting him. Though she wasn't as central to his routine as before, her presence was still important, though in a quieter way. Meanwhile, the royal family began discussing George's future. His learning team had expanded to include teachers who specialized in history, leadership, and government. This led to an unexpected change. One morning, Maria was called to a private meeting. The room was quiet, and Catherine and William spoke kindly but firmly. They thanked her for all her years of dedication, her trust, and her pivotal role in George's early life. They explained that George was now at an age where he no longer needed a nanny in the same way. His new teachers would help him transition into adulthood, which had been part of a plan made long ago. Maria sat in silence for a moment. She had always known this day would come, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel final. She only asked one question: "When do I stop?" Catherine looked at her and replied, "We thought you should choose, but George already knows. He wants to talk to you." Maria left the room and went upstairs, where she found George sitting by the window, drawing. When he saw her, he stood up. "Mom told me," he said softly. "I don't want things to change." Maria gave him a small smile, shaking her head. "You're growing up, and it's time," she said gently. He didn't speak again, but didn't look away either. That night, Maria packed up her few belongings: some books, a drawing George had made when he was 5, and a notebook filled with memories of his early years. The next morning, she walked him to breakfast for the last time. He sat next to her, and though it was an end of an era, there was a sense of peace in the change. After finishing breakfast, George gave Maria a heartfelt gift: a leather notebook with the words, "Thank you for being my first teacher," written inside. It was a quiet, personal gesture that marked the end of an era. Later that afternoon, Maria left Kensington Palace, taking the back steps she had used for nearly a decade. Her departure was understated, without any public announcement or fanfare. The palace arranged for her move to a modest home in West London, where her life transitioned into a simpler routine. Maria embraced a quieter life after leaving Kensington Palace, away from early mornings, uniforms, and royal meetings. Thank you for joining us in this heartwarming journey through Maria's story and her time with Prince George. If you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes look into royal life, be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more touching stories and updates. Stay tuned for more heartwarming content, and thanks for watching.